This is an emergency episode for Guardia de Medicina. I am here today with one of my great friends, Joseph Marcelli, who was just in one of our recent episodes. And if you have not seen that episode yet, it should be coming out here in the coming weeks. I'm also with my father-in-law, John Anderson. He is an outstanding golfer, much better than anybody else at this table. And
No
I'm
question.
just really excited to have him on today. I really enjoyed talking with him. We're going to be getting into a couple of different topics that are involved with AI and society in the future. And then, of course, we all know Anthony. Anthony, thanks for being here with us today.
Wouldn't miss it.
So we just want to take about 10 to 15 minutes to talk about artificial intelligence in the setting of society as a whole rather than just in the purview of healthcare. And John, I know that you have talked about this a lot, have studied this a lot. Would you mind sharing with the audience, what you do for work and how your expertise may come into play here?
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys. Good stuff. And I'm not the best golfer at this table, so we'll get the distance out of the way right away. In the capacity I work in, which is a marketing consulting group, not surprisingly, AI has emerged as an amazing force on the business side, mostly as an ability to eliminate redundant tasks. So it is more than a buzzword. It's more than an abstract in that space. There's a lot of panic, actually, in distribution, where I work, about how you're going to employ this powerful tool. So most of our clients are in an experiential phase. They may play with ChatGPT, or they may be doing something a little bit more dynamic. What I try to do with my clients is I bring them to a place where if they're going to deploy AI, use it in a capacity where it fortifies existing human resource versus eliminate. I think there's a little bit of a tendency to think of AI as a time saver, yes, right? A creative agent, yes. But it also has some sinister potential downsides that I know you spoke about in a prior podcast. So what we try to do in consulting with our teams, our clients, is, I encourage them to look at AI through the lens of human dignity and specifically Judeo-Christian ethic around what it means to be human. So if you start from that as your lens, then you could look at the dimensions of AI and its implications, whether it's in a medical, clinical capacity or in a business, eliminate redundant tasks. It opens up a different area of discussion and a different area of understanding.
Let's talk about for a second, I think that's a fascinating topic to tackle first. What does it mean to be a human? Because we start hearing these terms like transhumanism when we start getting into the in-depth talks of artificial intelligence. So just kind of going around the table, what do we define as a human? And I guess what we're essentially asking is, what is the quote-unquote anatomy of the soul or the anatomy of one's consciousness? How do we exactly try to put our finger on or get a close approximation of what that is?
So in 30 seconds, I can answer that.
In 30 seconds.
Can I hit pass and let it go around the room?
You can definitely hit pass. We
I'll
can
come
start
back,
with Father
start on
Joseph.
this
over
end.
I don't want to
here.
use up all the oxygen in the room.
You can use your 30 seconds. Go first.
You go ahead. I'll let you go first.
So we're defining.
How do we define, or how are we going to attempt to define the anatomy of the human soul, or in broader terms, human consciousness? Because I think those are probably two different things, especially when we start getting into the theological perspective on this issue. So maybe we should just start with human consciousness. What defines human consciousness?
Well, it's probably a question that's been asked for a long time. What defines human consciousness? It's probably the weighing of good versus evil and trying to make those decisions as you navigate through life for a given day. And then it's, the awareness of yourself and how you can affect the world around you.
Mm-hmm. And, I was, and I'm glad you made mention to the last part. The good versus evil, I think, may have something to do with the soul. I think that is a compass for the soul, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second. But I think consciousness is exactly what you said on your last part, which is the ability to recognize oneself. And I think there are different layers to this. So there are 3 tiers, or maybe even 4 tiers of consciousness when you really start to look at different things. And the 3rd tier of consciousness is what humans are. And there's only a couple other different species currently in the world that have that 3rd tier consciousness. It's the ability to look in the mirror and recognize that you are looking at yourself. Second tier consciousness is where you don't have that ability, but you are still able to react to external stimuli. And essentially, first tier consciousness means you just simply exist. So what do I mean by react to external stimuli? Well, there are different species in the world that don't have the ability to look and recognize themselves, but they have the ability to react to pain. They have the ability to react to cold. They have the ability to react to heat, and then they adjust themselves to get away from those things, or, avoid those things, avoid those external stimuli. Humans are the only species on Earth, and by the way, dolphins are the other ones that can have third tier consciousness. They can have the ability to look into a mirror and recognize that they're looking at themselves. We think they may be able to communicate like we do, but we're not 100% sure. We're still working on that. But fourth tier consciousness is the ability to recognize that we as a species, as humans, are all interconnected. And that's where I think we start to see the transition from defining the anatomy of consciousness to intertwining with the soul. Because I think that gets into, well, if we're all connected together somehow by one source, well, one, what is that source? And two, why? And I think part of that has to do with good and evil. And that's just my opinion on that situation.
Yeah, I think it was a very good job on short notice for that question.
Yes, for
Be
sure.
the first
But
one too. Yeah.
I think what you're articulating to Joe is that level of consciousness. The word that comes up obviously is meaning. So as humans, we have the ability to understand what meaning is. I think there's an opportunity, and I'm not a theologian. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm just a guy with maybe a little bit of wisdom that's 63 years old and seen a few things. But when you think about the distinction between instinct, which is what animals can possess, in that, and certainly we have instincts as well. Humans have instincts, but then that being able to identify and search for meaning, and I think that's at the heart of Western civilization, and at the heart of, to your point about recognizing right and wrong,
I think people have been asking that question as long as they can ask that question. What are we? But one thing, it's hard to wrap it up in 30 seconds. I think you guys all did a great job. But I think the ability to have free will also plays into account there. We can, I can decide if I'm going to hop in my car and drive down the road. I can hang out here longer. We have those options. We make those decisions all the time, and I think that plays into it too.
And my mind went in 1,000 different directions when you said free will. One of the things that I find fascinating is that free will came up when we're talking about consciousness, because then it also begs the question, well, one, where did consciousness come from? And two, where did free will come from? There are some people that believe that there is no free will, that your pathway in life is already determined, and there's only one possibility no matter what.
People that believe in fate. Yeah, fate versus free will, for sure.
I'm definitely not in that category. I'm in the category where I feel that, the creator, whatever that may be, the creator has made endless amounts of possibilities for us, and we are the ones that have the ability to choose what path we follow through at that point. Now, trying to rein this conversation back in, because we can obviously get into this conversation for an hour alone. The reason why we did that is because in AI, we started asking ourselves question, well, if we start taking away meaning, or if we start looking at things through a different scope of what is good versus evil and what is the purpose of artificial intelligence, we start to get maybe some different answers. And so let's start off first with, meaning. What is the main purpose, or what is the meaning of artificial intelligence? What do we want it to do? What do you guys think?
That's a good question. I think from a secular perspective, or even from a economic perspective, as with just about every other advance from the Industrial Revolution on, it's been about what? Productivity and efficiency and optimization. If that's the only end game that AI can take us, there are deliverables. And we see anybody that's looked at their cell phone today or used a GPS map to get here employed that technology. All right. So the question then becomes, if we want it just solely to be an optimization tool, okay, you could, not unlike the Industrial Revolution and all the technology advances that came with that, who and how were guardrails established? Culturally, our societies in Western civilization, we've struggled with that through the centuries. And that could take you into a social or political or economic conversation about the merits of capitalism, for example, or the merits of socialism. My point is that if you look at it solely as a end game, what's the end game, then that's a very narrow view, and it's potentially very reckless. So in the capacity that I work with clients today, where they'll come to us and say, how can we employ an AI bot that might reduce 2 or 3 of our order entry people? That's their only goal. We caution them to say, well, why don't you think about making those 2 or 3 people more efficient? And then they could do things that if only they had time to do. So I think it's a summons. I call this a summons for leadership. It's a summons to look at your teams and, be able to think about how we can make them more efficient, not just more efficient, but even better, and look at the technology from that perspective. I know that was kind of a long wind up to your question, but
I think it's a great answer because we talked, I find it fascinating. You talked about the Industrial Revolution. I mean, that Industrial Revolution could have overtaken many, many jobs for people at that time. And we're worried about the same thing, right? We're worried about AI overtaking a lot of our jobs. Right. And I worry that people that sit behind a computer are in trouble of potentially being replaced by artificial intelligence. Like, we talk about coders. We talk about people that are organizing different types of schedules and where things are going to be delivered. I think all that's going to be AI generated here, within the next maybe 10 years. And I think that there's going to be a large portion of our population that, unless they adapt and get different skills, may be out of a job at that time, unless, of course, there's something that we can't foresee where this AI creates a whole another section of jobs that just weren't available to us before.
So this technology is obviously brand new. You look at, and I don't want to equate it to the atomic bomb because that's a pretty big hyperbole, but only certain people had access to the atomic bomb. Everybody that has a computer or a cell phone has access to AI in some capacity right now. And to me, that's the scary part because, like you said, you have to use it ethically. And I worry that not everybody will use it ethically. So like you said, what's the end game here? If the end game is to automate everything, I don't necessarily think that would be the worst thing in the world. If you take away a lot of back-breaking tasks that humans don't have to do anymore, I don't think that's bad as long as there's a way for humans still to thrive. But that's the part that I worry about is getting from A to B. How do you get there?
And, I guess I'm going to ask Joe this specific question because I, want you to give me your opinion on this, being a little bit younger than us. I'm worried that we may lose, we meaning the Earth's population, the ability to generate an income for ourselves. There may just simply not be enough jobs available for the number of people on the planet once AI overtakes whatever percentage that it may take. What are your thoughts on, one, what would that do to the male psyche? One of the driving factors of the male psyche is to provide for their families. And two, where are we going to stand about, well, the people that don't have the ability to get those jobs anymore, how are they going to live? How are they going to interact with society and, buy materials for themselves?
Yeah, so I guess we don't know the end goal of AI right now. It seems like it is for the sake of efficiency to replace most of this. I think
it's to save money. The end goal is to save money, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the question is what do people do once if things are replaced, if jobs are replaced by computers and AI, what is our meaning and purpose at that point? And is it uniquely American to have values in productivity and to make our identity productivity instead of focusing on maybe like family or religious values instead, and making that can then become our end goal or our focus rather than, a job or a career? Will it become something more of a sinister outcome for people who have no meaning in those things?
And, another example, and Anthony and I have talked about this before, that we have mentioned, the cashier clerks at grocery stores, they're unfortunately being replaced. And so one of the things that, should make the most sense to do at that point would be to decrease the price of groceries to make it more affordable, because there's also less jobs, or if you could think about it, less money available for the general population to spend on groceries. Well, that's not happening. So, I'm worried that that's going to lead to also, possible worsening poverty rates to where people don't have the ability to buy certain groceries or buy a house or things like that. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but, is the answer potentially hidden in the fact that we need some type of universal income? I'm not really sure.
So Andrew Yang, when he ran for president, was running on a platform of universal basic income, but he was going to fund that based on if you replace jobs with automation, then you receive a tax for doing so. And that tax is what ends up paying the universal basic income. And what he had proposed starting with was something like $1,000 a month, which, you can't live off of $1,000 a month, but it could give your family a lot of flexibility and breathing room in times of job loss or trying to start a new business. And again, are we here to work? Or are we here to learn about life, to raise our families? What's our purpose here?
Why are we here?
Yeah.
Well, I think I know why we're here. I mean, that's obviously a big, ambitious thing to say, very arrogant, but I think we're here to find the good Lord. That's why I think we're here. I think we're in some type of reality that he has made for us, and we're here to simply find him and declare that. I don't know. Why does everybody else think that we're here? I mean, what is the purpose of us being here? Which is interesting that we're even asking, because from an evolution standpoint, it's not appropriate to ask that question. If you have anxiety about why you are on planet Earth, how are you going to survive? You're not supposed to take time and energy to think about those things. You're supposed to be focusing your energy on how to improve your survival rates, improve your reproductive health, improve the ability to pass on whatever you have to the next generation.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot to unpack in those statements you made. I'll start with the first, to know God, to love God, to serve God, and be with him in the next life. Mm-hmm. So that's foundationally Judeo-Christian. Anthony, your point about industrial revolution and technology advancing, we are a very resourceful species. So there were fears when the automobile replaced the horse and buggy that the people that made buggy whips would starve. Well, what happened to the people that made buggy whips? Well, they made alternators for cars. I'm using just a little bit of hyperbole, but my point is that what I think is important to really recognize is AI just another technological evolution, or is it completely transformative? Mm-hmm. And I think you can make a pretty strong argument that it's transformative. It changes the fabric of meaning, and it changes the fabric of what it means to be a society. And I think as people of goodwill, we have an obligation to remember what the common good is, and as a group in unity, come together to understand what that means and how do we advance it by using these technologies. This is not a new phenomenon in a sense that technology emerges and there are risks and sinister side effects. I think about what has been presaged in cinema and books for 100 years. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Terminator films. We've presaged this anxiety about there's this sinister outcome that happens when we give up control of meaning. Mm-hmm. We give up control of machines that are not human. So I think the key question, and this would be a lot to unpack, because when you think about your very first question, what it means to be human, there's a societal dynamic, there's a dynamic that's spiritual, there's a dynamic that's economic, there's a dynamic that's political. And with grace, I'm a Christian, I'm a Roman Catholic Christian. I believe that if our consciences are properly formed, we can, imperfectly so, we're all imperfect, fellow sinners, all of us out there, imperfectly so, we can navigate that way when we call upon grace to make those decisions. So
it's going to be really fun to watch it play out. That is for sure. I definitely have huge concerns, though. I have huge concerns because I don't feel as if the elites of the United States and the government of the United States are in our best interest. And there's
also, and again, this is getting pretty tinfoil hatty. But one of the things that
Tinfoil hattie.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh yes.
I love it.
one of the things about AI that concern me is that it's a doomsday scenario. And what do I mean by that is that it could end the world, and not really in the way that, necessarily the Terminator, where they become sentient and they start a war against man. That's not really the only way.
I love when you talk about this. I love it.
We've talked about
The
this
paper
before.
clips.
Yeah, it's called the paperclip theory. So let's say you design an AI to make paperclips. So initially that AI is cranking out all the paperclips it can, but it learns more and more, okay, hey, I can make paperclips out of metal, I can make paperclips out of wood, I can make paperclips out of all this stuff.
Machine learning. Yeah.
Then it learns, I can rearrange atoms to make paperclips. So I'm going to continue to make paperclips, and it goes on this exponential trajectory until it's destroyed everything in the universe to create paperclips, including the human race and Earth. So there are scenarios where AI just gets too good at what it's doing and destroys the human race because it's not even on the radar of what it's doing. And to me, that's the scary part, is there's a whole realm of possibilities that we can't even consider when it comes to this kind of technology.
Yeah.
And another reason why we can't consider it, if you take it one step beyond that, whenever AI passes, and I forget the term for it, but whenever it becomes smarter than the majority of average humans, I think it's AGI is what they're referring it to. They're going to be able to do things that we can't even comprehend why they're doing them. And then eventually what may happen is we may become dependent on those tasks and then not even understand how those tasks are even being completed.
Yeah.
It's really nerve-wracking.
That's the black box, crystal box paradox. So, if AI in its first iterations is a large language model that mimics what it can take in, okay? So again, this is outside of my realm as far as in the clinical space, where information and data is aggregated and then probable outcomes are recommended, whether that's in the form of treatment or prescribed medicines or physical treatment, whatever that might be.
And just to interrupt you, just to say one thing. So what John is referencing is something called the ASCVD score. And that is a score that is used to estimate the risk of having a heart attack in the next 10 years based off clinical data. Also referencing the Myriad genetic test, estimating the risk of breast cancer over the lifetime. And so these are things that are already developing. I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I'm glad you added that. So the black box is where that information goes in, and then how it comes out is the deliverable that could be used for prescribing a medication or whatever. The next threshold of AI is identifying a crystal box so we know how it's made those decisions, so that if something is flawed in that crystal box, there's visibility to that. So the example in commercial space, where if a company is trying to identify intent to buy algorithms for a specific product, they can see how the machine learning mechanisms took that information in and made their choices with respect to groupings. Okay, it's just kind of a crude explanation of it. But up to this point, that box remains somewhat black. They can't really know how it made those decisions. Now, in a completely autonomous model, that could be pretty dangerous potentially. So maybe even the Terminator scenario.
Yeah.
I want to talk about two different things you mentioned there. You talked about, what'd you call it? What kind of box?
The black box and the crystal box.
I want to talk about that just for a second, because we've been, meaning Anthony and I have been calling this giant algorithm that the insurance company used to deny claims the black box, because we can't see what's inside the algorithm. We're not allowed to. They won't let us know that, because then we'll know exactly what to put in our chart to get that whatever test covered. Find it's interesting that we're talking about crystallizing that and making it perfectly clear. So I think the same oversight that you're talking about for society needs to be applied to medicine. The other thing that you had mentioned, you talked about how it could be autonomous. And I'm going to change that verbiage just for a second. What if it becomes neuroplastic? What if it starts to be able to adapt what it's doing based off of inputs? Then you have a fully functioning entity. And who knows if that entity has a soul? It does not have a soul, but are we opening up the door for other things to take control of it? That's very scary.
I think it seems like we somehow need to get AI to ask almost similar questions of what is consciousness and what is meaning, so that if it's not just the meaning isn't let's turn the universe into paperclips. It's paperclips are useful to human life and how many things can we turn into paperclips to maximize this for human life. We need AI to recognize the dignity of humans, basically.
And I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. What was Anthony's remark earlier about thriving?
Right.
So it's a summons to determine collectively what does it mean to thrive.
So, and if it begins to ask those questions, then maybe in healthcare, that algorithm, that black box algorithm starts to work in our favor because it realizes that the things we're doing are beneficial for the human that we're trying to help in that instance.
Sure.
Wouldn't that be something ironic if these insurance company AIs ended up learning how awful what they're being programmed to do and flip a switch to start getting things covered?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that I think a lot of people are worried about when you mention, how do we get the AI to realize that, hey, we need you to really focus on benefit human nature. I don't believe for a single second that anybody creating these AI devices are thinking that. They're thinking, how can I help singular best serve myself? That's problem number one. Problem number two, what if the answer, this gets into transhumanism, linking it back all the way to the beginning of our conversation, what if the answer is the only way to get AI to realize that it needs to do what's best for the human race is if humans combine with it? What do I mean? Well, we talked about Neuralink. We have that chip that interfaces with our nervous system. We talked about how it can link to a direct database such as Palantir. And then, you can start thinking of things instead of going on an app on your phone. You think to yourself, oh, I want to place a bet on the Ohio State game. You can just do it right by thinking it. Or you can think, hey, I want to play this video game and shoot that character on the TV. Well, you can just think it and it does it. It starts to get a little weird in that scenario when things start to play out like that. And the clear indications are that's where this is all heading. Whether people end up ill and have Neuralink or whether they end up healthy on Neuralink, eventually a parent's going to have to sit there and make a choice. Hey, do I want my child to have this device put in to increase their intelligence to be more competitive in the work environment, or do I not? Eventually, parents are going to be left with that decision, and I don't know what the right answer is.
I can't even imagine making that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
It's on the surface, it's like, clearly I don't want something installed in my child's brain. But like, what if they're paralyzed and you could give them a life of walking around, and it's hard to say no to that.
Or what if you say, let's say you're, Elon Musk, you say your child can have the capability of ChatGPT in their brain. They can think of a question and it'll just release all the answers.
The smartest person in the world.
Versus, somebody like me who's just sitting here and looking up things on Google.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a fair fight.
People of a certain age will remember a Disney movie called The Computer Who Wore Tennis Shoes. I'll just put that out there. So somebody whoever's listening to this podcast,
comment on it. Yes.
Google search The Computer That Wore Tennis Shoes.
Please. Yeah. Well, guys, this was a lot of fun. Does anybody else have anything to add? We need a full episode on this specific topic, but this was, we wanted to get this out there because we've been itching to talk about it. Does anybody else have anything to add?
I was just going to add something that really stunned me. In August of this past year, Time Magazine released a list of the most influential people in AI. So names you'd expect to be on there: Elon Musk, Jason Altman. But on that list was Pope Leo.
Really? That's really interesting.
And there's a term that the Vatican has been using called algorithmics. Algorithm ethics merged together. Actually, Francis convened a meeting about 4 years ago. So I just think that speaks to the people that are in charge of AI, if you want to use that characterization. They recognize that this is different than just technology. And I think that's really compelling.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope this finds you well as we bring in the new year. Anthony and I are hoping to get an episode out on 2025 recap here in the near future. So please tune in for that one, and please like and subscribe. Hope everybody has a great day.
Thanks a lot, guys.
You bet. Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
I'm Dr. Joseph Miladore. This is Guardia de Medicina. We are the guardians of medicine. My goal is to expose corruption, amplify the signal of love, and honor the sacred. This content is brought to you by Youngstown Guardia LLC. All rights reserved. Any reproduction, redistribution, or unauthorized use of this material without written consent is strictly prohibited.
I'm Anthony Fossaceca, PharmD. My mission is to uncover the realities of medicine and bring about discussion of the important issues that are currently flying under the radar. In a time where people are so divided, I want to find common ground and identify true problems rather than being distracted by emotional divides.